Sorry, can I interrupt? Perfect.
Thank you, Joe.
And,
So I
and could
think-
you make Brian the co-host as well? Sorry, I'm just working off an iPad, so it's a little difficult.
Yep. So Jim Bell's here, Amy's here, Paul Foley here, Penny Ration here, Paul Tolley here, Bill Walbert here. As far as let's do with the regular members first. Michael Chen is not here. Michael Morrow, are you there? So Michael's not there. And then for advisor, Stuart's here. Thank you, Stuart.
Good morning.
Sufficient non-voting, Leon's here. Is John DeFederi? So I see Yes is here, and Andrew Walsh is here. Joe, thank you. And I don't know if Tiger's here. No, okay. So we'll call the meeting to order. First business is public comment. Were there any, Joe, were there any emails or questions sent in to you from the public?
We did not receive any questions or comments.
Thank you. Now the second item on the agenda is the minutes. Did everyone get the copy of the minutes?
Yeah, we did.
Any
Yep.
changes, corrections? If none, do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Yes, here.
Paul? Second?
Yep.
I'll make Penny second them because I know she actually reads them. All those in
Yeah.
favor? Once a lawyer, always a lawyer, Penny. I know. I know.
Exactly.
Well, let's hold off on the trip report up to North Haven. We can talk about that later. Right now, we have a progress update. And Brian, if you want to start that conversation off, why don't you do that, please, sir?
I will. Thank you, Bill. I also want to introduce somebody else that's on the call today. Frank Fansler's also participating. You see Frank. Frank is your professional cost estimator. So I just want to introduce him because he's also going to be speaking and sharing information from his cost estimate. So I'm going to share this. And hopefully you can see what I'm seeing on your screen. You might have to move your taskbar either up or down to make this work. But what I'm going to do is walk through kind of where I left off from your June 10th meeting. And on June 10th, I did give you this slide. This slide was where we left off on June 10th because it was a summary of FV Consulting started their estimate on May 19th. On June 10th, we had not received it yet. Armani Restoration was working with Proseco to do some masonry testing on the building, and you had not received any results or reports on that. Well, I want to update you as to what's happened since. On June 21st, the professional cost estimate was forwarded to the town of New Canaan. And also on June 21st, we forwarded the Armani Restoration and Proseco Masonry results to the town. And on July 1st, I also provided a square footage comparison chart to New Canaan. This is something that came out of your June 10th meeting. What's the square footage and how does it compare with the needs assessment? So I wanted to complete that, and I completed that on July 1st. Which brings us up to today. So those are really the three things that I want to touch on today. I'll do the masonry restoration first.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Can we just have everyone mute? That's not, everyone mute. There's some side interference.
Thanks, Joe. Armani Restoration is a contractor that specializes in masonry construction and masonry restoration. We contacted them to come down to take a look at the building. give us their professional opinion on the condition of masonry and limestone and anything that needs to be done on the exterior of the building. And they did that. And what they found was the exterior of the building is in good condition. That's their words out of their report, but they did highlight some things that should be included if we're going to be renovating the exterior masonry. They did find butt joints at the precast that were open joints and some that needed to be resealed, and that's with caulk or a silicone sealant, not with mortar. So we would rake out those joints and then repair those for watertight.
Hey, Brian, can I ask you
yeah.
a question in terms of terminology? When someone looks at this and uses the term good, where does that fall in terms of, you know, a continuum of quality? Is like excellent, good, very good, good, you know, what does that mean? Good. Like, does that mean that with these improvements, it's great?
Yes, it's meaning it's not a cause for concern. There's nothing there that seems to be extremely faulty or extremely deteriorated. But I think with these recommendations, if we implemented these recommendations, it would go to excellent.
Thank you.
And
These are
Brian,
the-
would you also say that the condition of the building is good above ground, or was there actually a pit dug and somebody looking below ground?
It was only what was visual, Stuart, only what
Okay.
they could see. We didn't do any demolition or demolition into the building. It was
So-
a visual of what was exposed.
So one of the recommendations is to do below grade work, correct?
Yes, correct. The top slide is the cheek walls at the entry. Those are actually two photos that are merged together. Some of the stones there is recommended to be removed and reset with flashing. At the rear of the building, two things came up about the rear of the building. One is the paint that was applied, the white paint is not a breathable paint. And what's happening is it's containing moisture and it's causing the brick to spall. Whenever you're going to have brick deterioration, a lot of the times it's because of moisture related issues. And it appears that there's some deterioration because of the type of paint that was applied. So they're recommending that that paint be removed, chemically removed, and then a new breathable paint be applied to the rear. And anything that's deteriorated because of that moisture be replaced. And he gave you an example of under a window that would be removed and replaced. Scraping and painting steel lintels, that's a very minor maintenance issue and would be taken care of because we're replacing windows. We would be scraping and sealing and repainting those lintels anyway. I know he calls them lentils, but they're really lintels.
And what's the advantage of repainting? Why not just leave the brick exposed?
Well, you're going to get a different look. You're not going to be able to get 100%, Stuart. It's going to be to get 100% of that paint off. It's going to be a bigger effort. So I think if you're going to try to chemically remove it, it's not going to be an appearance that you're going to want to leave. So resealing it with a breathable finish would get it back to a really nice looking finish.
Okay.
Right, and then how often would it have to be repainted?
Those are going to be a lifespan of 10 plus years. On
So
that.
every 10 years, it needs to be repainted,
Yes.
probably.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then he found some penetrations through the wall that weren't sealed. So any penetrations, just an opportunity for water to get into the wall. So these are kind of minor as far as looking at the entire exterior of the building. I saw these as pretty minor items that we would take care of if we were going to renovate the building. We would take care of any of these issues.
Yeah, it should be noted on the painting thing, it's only the back of the building. The ends and the front, the sides and the front, I believe, are pure brick and never been painted.
Another interesting test that they did is it's called the Rylam tube test. And what it does is it tests porosity of the masonry, and it tests it with water. What they do is they put a device up against the masonry. This is a tube. They seal it to the masonry, and then they fill it with 5 milliliters of water. And the 5 milliliters of water is representing wind-driven rain. And if you fill it all the way up to 5, which is up to this line, it represents about a 96 mile per hour wind event, with the pressure coming down and the pressure applied to the masonry. So it's testing the water absorption of the brick under a wind-driven rain event. And you can see the miles per hour of the rain event. Most rain falls vertically, but you do have events where rain comes sideways, and the rain would come against the masonry. And that's when the water would have the opportunity to enter into the masonry. The tube was filled with 5 milliliters of water, and it failed in 10 seconds, meaning all of the 5 milliliters went into the masonry and was absorbed in 10 seconds. A successful test would have no more than 1 milliliter of water absorbed in 20 minutes. So 1 milliliter in 20 minutes, and you had 5 milliliters in 10 seconds, which means the masonry that was used there is very porous. If you have a wind-driven rain event, that water is going to enter the masonry and be absorbed. Now, this is something that's
So
not.
Brian, what you're telling me is that the masonry here is as porous as the offensive line of the New York Jets? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, on a bad day.
On a bad day, okay.
Yeah, on a bad day.
And what you're also suggesting is that tomorrow morning, with 45 to 55 mile an hour heavy rains, we're going to experience the 10-second failure.
Yeah, anything that goes against the building is going to get absorbed. And
Hey, Brian, is it the
Yeah.
brick that's absorbing or is it the mortar?
no,
I
it's
mean,
actually
I'm good.
they did both. The first one was the red clay brick. They tested it there, and the results failed.
Oh,
in 10
sorry.
seconds. And then the head joints and the mortar joints were tested, and they also failed in 10 seconds. So we have 2 results here. One's for mortar and one's for the brick. So that's a good question, Amy, and they were
It-
both tested.
Is it just the nature of this brick and this mortar, or is this just the nature of brick and mortar?
It's
I
the
mean-
nature of this brick and of this mortar. You could
It-
have other bricks that don't have this type of absorption.
So, Brian, has this brick deteriorated so it's absorbing more water, or is this like was this the quality of the brick when it was first, for the last 10, 20, 30, 40, however many years?
The brick is the same brick as day one, and the porosity is the same porosity as day one. It's been experiencing this through the life of the building. But where you have to be concerned is not so much during a day like tomorrow, because masonry can absorb, and then masonry dries out, and masonry has an ability to dry itself out. When you have a cavity wall, the water would go through the masonry, go down the cavity, and come out the bottom at the weep holes. So masonry in its very existence has some porosity to it. Where you have to be concerned with this is because anytime you have water entering your masonry gives you more exposure to deteriorated masonry. Water damage is your #1 source of deterioration for masonry. And that's where you have a freeze-thaw cycle. So if you have a condition where the water was to enter the building, if you had a rainstorm in December that happened to be a wind-driven rain, and then 2 days later, or a day later, you get freezing temperatures, that's where your concern is, that you're going to have some freeze-thaw spalling potentially on your masonry. Now, those conditions haven't really presented themselves in any way, but there is a product that they recommend that they could solve this and give you the reduce permeability. He does go into the next paragraph that they can offer a 10-year material and labor warranty to get this porosity down, but also provide a breathable sealer. And this is the product that would be applied. You could apply it to a test location. You could test it after it's excuse me, been applied. But this is something that would also be under a 10 to 15 year reapply, like the back paint. On the back, you would want to reapply this and reduce the water absorption within your building.
Hey, Brian, is this, a couple questions. Is this product been around a long time? Is this kind of how, in general, people treat porous brick? And the reason I ask that is because we talked about the paint on the backside of the building. Obviously, the wrong paint was put up. Obviously, at the time, they didn't think it was the wrong paint. You know, could this be one of these things that's like, seems like a great idea, and then shoot, maybe it's not. I mean, so, and I hear what you're talking about, the freeze frost cycle, and especially with changing climate, that might be a more of a struggle for these brick buildings. But how long has it been around? Is it, you know, environmentally friendly? Could we find out this was a great idea? I mean, and then 5 years from now go, oh shoot, we gotta take this all off.
So I think Proseco is a reputable company. They've been doing a lot of testing on these products. There have been other products in the past, but one of the things that's been a challenge for a lot of these companies is providing products that work and are also environmentally friendly. And that's changed the chemistry on some of these products. This one is, I don't know how long it's been out. It's relatively newer to the market because of the environmentally friendly aspects to it. And they're always having to change chemistries because of that. But this has been tested. It's been, you know, gone through the application for the 10-year period. So that's how they can offer a 10-year warranty. It's been on the market for over 10 years and working. And I'm sure 10 years from now, there might be another product that might be better or more environmentally friendly. But these things are common. These things are, it's a clear applied sealer. And when I say sealer, it seals for porosity, but it doesn't seal for breathability. That's something you don't want to do. That's the problem with the paint in the back, that they put on a product that doesn't breathe. It actually is a paint product that contained the moisture, if there was any moisture behind the wall. This one lets the vapor breathe through the surface, but doesn't allow water to penetrate. And it's designed just for the condition that you have on your building.
Amy, I've used a similar product over the last 40 years, and they're very effective.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, and is there a cost estimate for the whole building as to what it would cost every 10 years to do this?
Yes, because Frank has taken these recommendations and included them within his cost estimate. So I think that's a good question for Frank when he gets to his cost estimate. You know, did he, you know, what did he include for all of these masonry repairs and the masonry report?
Okay.
So I think this is incredibly helpful, and I'm a little bit like Amy. I just, if we, it sounds to me like the brick is, if it's the same brick that's been there for all those years, maybe we'd want to put this sealant on. But if we decide to go forward with the renovation, I think that would be another step where I would want to know a little bit more about it before just agreeing to do it. But it sounds to, this is a great report that our brick is in great shape. And I'd be curious what the porosity was, and even if they tested it on the town hall before they did the town hall renovation. Joe, I don't know if you know that or not. Not to put you on the spot.
No, we tested it. We added some through-wall flashing and did some other measures, and we repointed the town hall, which this doesn't need.
Right.
And Joe, would it have failed as this one would with 10-second failures?
It was not as porous as this, no.
So
Nor was it.
from a condition perspective, the town hall brick was in better condition than the police department building brick.
I wouldn't say better condition. It was less it was less porous.
Okay.
It required a full masonry reporting, through wall flashing. There was a lot of masonry work at the town hall,
Okay.
but it
So
was
it's
a different.
basically
distance.
different brick, right? The actual brick is different.
Correct.
Mhm. So I think it was well worth the visit that they took and the investigation. And Prosico also gave a recommendation for the type of type of paint to put on the rear of the building. So that was all also included in Frank's estimate.
Oh, great.
It was recommended that I just review quickly the scope of work that I sent to Frank to put within his cost estimate. You've seen these before. These are not new, but if there's anybody new on the call or new that on the committee, I just want to just briefly just run through what Frank has in his estimate. For site work, he's included the cost, an independent cost to build the carport and an independent cost to construct the pistol range. He has an independent cost for putting the physical training addition onto the rear of the building. The site work costs that he's carrying was for completely milling and repaving the fleet and staff areas to the rear, including the ambulance spaces, the drives down, the public parking in the front, adding some access control gates to the rear parking area, and also redoing the parking area between the South Avenue Cottage and the pistol range. We're not including anything for the apartment parking. So that's kind of the delineation of where the site work starts and stops. The upper floor, everything is being proposed as a phased construction project within the cost estimate. So this is the upper floor. This is including some relocations of the PD functions, but the relocation costs are not within the estimate. Those would be a soft cost to the town for any fit out that has to happen at Irwin Park or anything that has to be moved over. Frank's estimate deals with what the general contractor would be responsible for, staffing the project, general conditions of the project, and then completing the construction that's shown. So the main level, we are not including anything within our estimate for the dispatch center. That was recently renovated, but we did have some costs in the project for dust control, for any make safe conditions that the contractor would have to do to make sure this is occupied building and areas of construction are separated from areas of occupancy. The cost estimate does not have within it any public accommodations. If the public would need to find an additional answering point for public safety during phase 2, we don't have that within the estimate, but something would have to be done to accommodate the public during that phase because the lobby would be off limits to public access. The lower level, as I said, the physical training room is a separate number broken out in the estimate, and then renovations of the interior are also broken out as a separate number, not by phase, but by entire scope. So he doesn't have a phase 1 cost, phase 2 cost, phase 3 cost. We're looking at all of those phases as the responsibility of the general contractor to complete all of those items within a specified time frame. This is my comparative summary, which is very interesting. And I didn't start this knowing that it was what the answer was going to be. I started this just with raw data that I had. And I was able to go back to 2006. And 2006 is when we first came down to New Canaan and we performed our very first space needs assessment. In 2006, the police department was only occupying the lower level and the main floor. And when I went through the facility, I took off existing square footages of when they were occupying only those 2 floors. So I really want to be clear that the first column, the existing square footage in October 2006 represents the use of the main and lower floors at that time. It may not be accurately representing how they're using the building today, but I didn't go down and do a takeoff on the 3rd floor on how they're using and who's using what on the 3rd floor. But it's accurate to 2006. Also, I have in the bottom, you notice I have a net square footage and I have a gross square footage. Net square footage would be areas within the room that are being occupied. So 15,111 is the total of all the individual room spaces that the PD was occupying on 2 floors. The 21,909 is the gross square footage of those occupied areas. The 1.45 is what we call a net to gross factor. And what makes that square footage grow from 15 to 21 are all unused, unoccupied, or circulation spaces, corridors, stairs, elevators. It includes the wall thicknesses, exterior wall thicknesses, interior wall thicknesses. And there is a definite factor of going from a net square footage to a gross square footage. Whenever I do a space needs assessment, I'm talking net square footage. If I want 100 square feet, I want that room to be 10 by 10 interior dimensions. So then I put a net to gross factor to get it to a gross square footage. In 2018, I updated the original space needs assessment, and this is the space needs assessment that is current. Now, one of the things that we've taken out of this 2018 is we took out the firing range. We did include a simulated firearms training at 600 square feet, but you see there's no range in this number. And this is just data taken directly from the needs assessment of while they were occupying 15,111, I saw the need of 18,165. My 1.35 multiplier is a planning tool. We hadn't designed anything, and the space needs assessment was a generic document. It wasn't specific to South Avenue. So we use 1.35 as a planning guide, which brings it to a gross square footage need of 24,522. So those are just 2 snapshots in time. One is actual in 2006. One is a planning guide in 2018. Now I took this, the schematic design that you're looking at in June of 2021, and this is the drawing that I sent to Frank for the cost estimate. And you can compare the public space allocation in 2021 at 1143. Now, public means all of the yellow space that you see, for me, is all public. So it's the emergency operations, it's a public interview, the restroom, the lobby, the vestibule, the training classroom, even these permitting and interview rooms are all included in a public number. So it's not an individual space. It's all of the areas in yellow are regarded public. So that's how I come up with 1143, but that's also consistent with my space needs assessment.
But you refer to that as actual square footage, when in fact, is that not proposed square footage?
It's I would agree with that, Stuart. It's actual from the actual schematic plan,
Oh, okay,
but it's all being proposed right now.
okay.
So actual and proposed, like, you could use them interchangeably, but it's what's on the drawing. It's
Gotcha.
actual from your proposed plan.
Gotcha, okay.
So you can come down and see that there are slight variations in some. There are some deviations of administration is higher. Detective Bureau is higher. forensics lab is higher. You get slight deviations down the list.
How come the Sally Port's so much smaller?
Oh, because in the space needs assessment, we were anticipating a 2-bay Sally port. And in the schematic design, we only were able to accommodate 1 bay. But if
And that
we,
work, and Leon, that works for you? I mean, that works? Is Leon on? Okay.
Sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, I mean, one bay Sally Port, well-designed is fine for you?
No, I mean, obviously, if it's a renovate as new, we're limited. So no, one is not ideal. 2 would be ideal.
Well, what do you have now? You have one, right?
Yeah, we have one and it's.
And if, I mean, sure, it's like you always want the 3-bay garage, but it works for you? Okay, especially a redesigned one?
It'll be better, right, than what we have now. The challenge is, right now we have a vehicle in there because of, it was seized as part of an investigation. So that's no longer, and our other bay that we have other stuff in that we can't use. So we're kind of running out of space in that regard. So certainly 2 would be ideal. One larger one, like it's being proposed, would be better than what we have. Yes.
right now, they have 375 square feet as their 1 bay. And we're increasing the 1 bay to 500 square feet. So we're making the 1 bay bigger, but we were not able to accommodate the 2 bays that were in the needs assessment.
If we're doing this project, why don't we do it right the first time, in my opinion? Put the 2 bays in and make this building last for 50 years, not for,
Well,
10.
Paul, there's a 3-bay garage on the side, and the Sally Port shouldn't be a storage area.
Yeah.
We can build storage areas elsewhere for seized vehicles. You shouldn't be using the Sally Port for that.
Yeah,
So Leon, when you're,
That's what was, well, go ahead. Never mind.
Yeah.
Leon, is the 1 bay sufficient for basically, prisoner, processing or bringing people in? Because when we've done all of our tours, we've basically seen, and people have told us that the 2nd bay is used for storage.
Yep.
So if there's other, they brought their tires in, they weren't storing their tires offsite. They were storing their tires at, in North Haven when we saw them. So in terms of, a really well functioning police department and doing prisoner and processing like that, 1 bay is enough, right?
Yeah, 1 bay just for that limited purpose is enough. The challenge is kind of everybody's pointed out a deficiency, is we just don't have enough storage for vehicles. We've run out of space on site. There's nowhere off site that we've identified that would work. So that should certainly be a consideration of this, because the needs are only going to increase as we move forward. So that's something we should try to address as part of this project. I mean, if you look at our lower lot by the South Avenue house, there's, I think, 4 vehicles there that are in spaces that are seized and we can't release yet, or have been, can't be released to the owners or to the insurance companies as part of investigation. So that's in addition to the other vehicle that we have and the other bay that we have evidence. And so we're that's a huge deficiency right now that we should try to address in some way.
Yeah, but from a cost perspective, it makes more sense to store them somewhere that's not a Sally Port, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the assumption that it's only going to go up,
Yeah, I mean, that's what.
I don't know if you can assume that, right? So.
Well, that's our recent experience based on facts.
Are there, this is, I guess, for Leon and Joe, but if that's one of the issues, we have other areas in town, and but obviously they'd have to be secure and stuff like that. There's the barn at Irwin and things like that. I don't know if there's ever, sort of an overflow area that we could look at as a committee and assess if that would, help.
Absolutely. We were storing them at the highway department, but the highway department didn't want them anymore. They said that they couldn't give up the space and there wasn't enough room. So like I said, this should be part of our solution, meaning the efficiency.
Yep.
And
Joe, so
Yeah.
from a town perspective, Joe, if we only put one Sally Port in here, do you think we could reach an agreement with the town with respect to other, spaces in town that the police department would have access to?
So I think we'd have to make, I would assume we'd have to make something, but we could look at and see if there's an underutilized space. But just because of the secure, just to make it secure itself, the requirements for the police department to store things.
I would think we could find some
Leon-
alternative. We have a lot
Leon,
of
could you,
space.
could you give us, in an ideal situation, what would the storage lot characteristics be? Does it have to be covered? Does it have to be fenced? Does it have to have security cameras? Does it have lighting? What would be the nature of the storage area for cars?
Yeah, all those items, and keep in mind, there's a couple of distinct vehicle storage issues, meaning for example, the Doulos murder investigation, we wouldn't want to keep that vehicle off site. We would want to keep that vehicle in site, on our site in our close proximity rather than off in some other space because of the, how delicate that investigation is and how big it is versus a fatal motor vehicle accident after we've processed that we still have to retain it for X number of months until the case is resolved. That could be an off-site storage issue. So yes, it should be fenced in, it should be lighting, there should be security cameras, access control, just to make sure that we don't break that whole chain of evidence regarding a vehicle in that regard. And right now, it's not ideal the way we're storing vehicles, but we don't have any other option.
Right now, there are two closed bays which are generally used in the auxiliary garage right beside the Sally Port, which are often used for vehicle evidence storage. And then the last time I toured, there were at least 2 or 3 vehicles in the lower parking lot, wrecks that were there for evidence storage.
That's right.
So we've got at least 2 areas where you could keep a Doulos type vehicle on site, not in the Sally Port. And then, I agree with all your discussion about additional places, someplace else, fence, security, and so on.
So Jim, if you're suggesting we're going to use the maintenance bay for storage of cars, then where will you do the maintenance?
No, there's one set up for maintenance and 2 have been used for storage. There's 3 bays there. But you
I
can
don't know
do
if we
whatever
need
you
to,
want.
yeah,
It
I
can
don't
be
know if we
done
need to
whenever.
solve this now, but if the community decides to go in the renovator's new direction, obviously, and we fine tune these plans, it's good for the community to understand what's in our estimate, our broad estimate, and something that we may want to fine tune going forward.
Right.
I think this chart gives you the opportunity to fine tune. I think the patrol functions, interestingly enough, the 4305, we've met the requirements for patrol, which was really deficient, that we saw originally was deficient. We've met that. Even evidence was we were looking at double the size of the existing evidence storage. And the plans that you have actually meet this space needs requirement for square footage. And we didn't alter anything. We just took square footages off and we didn't alter the plan to get to these numbers. We just gave you data. The simulated firearms training from 600 to 11 is because we added the defensive tactics, which was not in the original estimate. We did provide for the simulated firearms training, but the defensive tactics was an add, which made that number go higher.
So Brian, does this include the firing range? Is that included in the
Now,
1100 or is that additional?
Good question. The 19426 is what we have in the net. The 1.57 is the resulting net to gross. Now this number goes higher because the building is a little inefficient, which gives you this as what they're occupying. What's the difference is this 3505 does not include the firearms training range. At the bottom of the sheet, the proposed range is 2,730. That was not included in the 2018 needs assessment. It's not included in this 30,505. The 30,505 is increased from 21,909 because They're now occupying the upper floor. We've added a maintenance bays in 2008, and we're adding a proposed physical training addition within the schematic design. So they've expanded to the upper floor, and also the building's gonna have 2 additions that brings it to 3505. Does not include the firearms training range.
Hey, Brian, why do we have 1,000 square feet increase in administration?
Oh, just because I gave the chief a really big office.
There you go.
I have, if you want to go back to the plan, I have administration is all the blue area. So we have a large conference room
Okay,
within that. So it's administration plus this conference room. So it's all of this area that you have. I just labeled it all administration because they were asking for all of these spaces in the needs assessment, but because the area was there, we occupied it all with administration.
okay.
All right, hey, Brian, on the records division and records retention,
Yes,
it looks like it was at, 883 and now it's at 490
that is
combined.
correct. Yeah.
Why going down? I think we need more space for retention. Don't we? Chief?
Well, the 550 is what we were
Yeah.
proposing for both. I mean, right now, I thought they had more than adequate at 500. They were using some existing space and it was at 500. I was seeing the need is 550 for both, for records and for retention. And we're at 480, so we're a little 490. So we're a little bit under the 550, but not by a lot. The area of records is the area that's in blue with the 2 on it. That's their existing records. So that's where they have, and nothing was looking to change in that location as far as size. They do come over into this area for copy room. And so this is a common copy area that they also utilize. And where I was taking off the square footage for retention was on the 3rd floor. This archive files would be an area for retention of files beyond what they have within their record space. So they are retaining files within this space, but I also gave them a archive space.
Yeah, to kind of add to that, in our tour of North Haven, they identified a serious deficiency with record storage. That's a, I mean, I think there's three areas of storage that we're kind of deficient right now in: property evidence, records, and vehicle storage. So those are kind of 3 focus areas, and I think we need to kind of refocus on our needs related to those 3 areas and see what other considerations we can make. Because reality is, as much paperwork as is digital, we still have a tremendous requirement to keep a lot of paper records, and that's not going to decline from what I understand. So that just needs to be an ongoing consideration. And right now we have a room where we're storing records, and that we had some mold growth and had to remediate that and things like that. So that's just something we should certainly take a closer look at.
It seems like if you had to grab more space, you could probably grab it from administration. I mean, if you're going up 1,000 square feet, and I'm sure the space would be nice, but it seems like that, if you have to steal some, I don't know, if it could be a separate room or whatever, but it seems like there's more space there. Because in this plan, which is kind of cool, we're giving the PD all 3 floors. Before we had talked about trying to, carve out the 3rd floor for something else, which we know is incredibly problematic, and trying to have something co-locate with the police department. So, I mean, I think it's a good idea, to use the space for the PD, but it seems like there's space there. We could redeploy if needed.
So as I say, it's data. I think it's good data for you to have. I'm glad I put the chart together, and at the bottom of the sheet, you can see square footages of each floor and how we came up with the gross, and then we added the physical training addition. And that's just raw data.
You're worried about the storm.
Somebody else has to mute. So option A, this is the same slide you saw in June. It's what we sent to Frank as for his cost estimate requirements, how we were going to make improvements to the plan. But what is actually this renovate as new? We've used the term, and we've used the term kind of back and forth, but what does it really mean? The term is used in Connecticut for school construction. The Department of Administrative Services uses this term for school cost reimbursement programs. And what it means is taking their definition, because their definition is what's pretty common throughout the state. And it originates in the school renovation programs, is the project results in a renovated facility taking on a useful life comparable to that of a new facility, and which will cost less than building a new facility. So we're going to make it comparable to a new facility. I think if you looked at North Haven, that's what we did there. It's comparable to a new facility, but it costs less than a new facility. If you're going to go to school reimbursement, you have to prove that it costs less than building a new facility. And this is done with cost estimates and professional cost estimators, showing the state that the renovate as new does bring cost savings versus just tearing it down and building it completely new. The entire facility will be brought into 100% compliance with all applicable codes and accessibility requirements. That's a given. We need to make this building 100% code compliant to anything that's codes and standards, including what they have out there for police facilities called essential facilities. These have to be buildings that last through natural disasters and higher wind load criteria, seismic criteria than any other facility in town. They have this essential facility requirement for hospitals, fire stations, police stations, any structure within your municipality that you'd want to have survive through a natural disaster. So that's a code requirement for this project, and we would have to bring it 100% into compliance. The renovated facility will have a useful life for continued operation comparable to that of a new facility, and they term that greater than 50 years. So the facility itself has a 50-year life plus expectancy. The renovations will not compromise the structural integrity of the existing building. Obviously, we have what he just said, essential facility requirement. We can't compromise the building in any way. And all proposed mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems will have a useful life of 20 years, or that comparable to a new system if less than 20 years. When we're putting in mechanical systems unfortunately don't have 50-year life expectancies in a lot of these systems, but they would have energy efficiency built into them, and they'll have useful life of 20 plus years. And that's just the definition of renovate as new coming out of the state of Connecticut. So that's what we're proposing for this building. And that's what we think we will be accomplishing for this building to meet that requirement. So Bill, does that answer your question you had earlier, is what does renovate as new mean?
Yes.
Hey, Brian, for the, and I'm going to use the wrong term, the command center that we recently renovated that we're not touching. What is that? I forget when that was funded. It was a couple of years ago. What is that useful life? Where we're just going to keep it in place?
Well, that has more to do with the technology of the radio systems than, I assuming you went to all digital equipment during the renovation.
Yes, we did.
So I would say that has at least a 10 to 15 year life, but it's like computers in a lot of ways. Computers, how much do you have to upgrade software and upgrade equipment? That might be every 5 years. Software improvements happen and computer equipment has to be replaced. So it's the radio system itself is the backbone of that. And that system, if it was replaced new, that system probably would not be going out of vogue until another 10 years.
And with this renovate is new, and I think this is really exciting, by the way. Given we're working off an older structure and renovating it is new, are there additional, or would there be additional maintenance, periodic maintenance expenses associated with this versus a new building? We know that the brick sealant would be one of them. And it's just that we just need to make sure we know those so that we build them into the town capital plan, so we don't get surprised year 10 that we got to put XYZ amount of money into this building.
Amy, other than what you just mentioned for the exterior, the interior would be just as you would
Anybody
need
else?
for a new building.
Great, thank you.
Which brings me to the cost estimate. I think this is something that I'm going to turn over to Frank, and he can explain, but he also has some assumptions that he made in the estimate. I think he's going to go through those first, and then we can get into the numbers. Frank, you on mute?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
There you go.
Thank you. You hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you. And nice to be here. I think as a point of introduction, I just wanted to let the committee know that I've worked with Brian. I've been associated with Brian now for, I don't know, 25 years.
Yeah.
In that range. I've done numerous cost estimates for Brian on a variety of projects, but mostly with public safety facilities. I could hazard a guess that I would say that I've estimated for Brian somewhere in the range of 50 public safety facilities over the course of 25 years. So we've been pretty successful with our estimates. I think they've been reasonably accurate, especially in the schematic stage, which this is. And I think Brian can fill you in more as to the comfort level that he has with what I do. So for this particular project, the information that Brian has provided is typical of what I see coming out of his office. I mean, in fact, in the one area where it was a little different was with the exterior restoration and renovation piece, which we had an expert provide us with some more detailed information. So that was very helpful. The way I estimated the project was, as Brian had alluded to earlier, was to separate the estimates out into discrete pieces. The biggest piece being the renovation of the existing building, a separate estimate for the addition for the physical training area with the roof deck above it. The pistol range standalone building was a separate estimate, and the carport was a separate estimate, and the site improvements was a separate estimate. And the bottom line I came to for the project for construction.
Brian, you want to move this screen forward one page?
Bottom line for the construction cost was, about $11.25 million. Now, let me just point out to you a couple things with the estimate relative to how the number is arrived at. At an early stage like this, I can anticipate what I see on the drawings and what I can anticipate from my experience. That said, I always place a contingency on my estimates, and at an early stage of design like this is, I've used a 10% contingency factor, which you could see down at line item number 40. Beyond that,
Frank, can you, what's your what does that 10% cover? So what I'm familiar with contingencies on projects is you have a design contingency, a construction contingency, and an owner's contingency.
Yep.
So, you know.
This is, I would call this is my contingency. But this is, this is a design / estimating contingency. So this 10% covers both things that I did not anticipate based on the preliminary nature of the design documents that I've received from Brian. So it's for his, it's partly his contingency to, as he develops his design details. And secondly, it's a contingency for things that, for lack of a better term, things I don't get right. Whether I've made some mistake in takeoff of quantities or in the pricing of a certain element of the work, and in just taking into account changes in market conditions that may happen that I can't anticipate, that no one can anticipate. So that's what that is. I mean, in addition to that, you as a responsible owner of the project, should carry your own change order contingency for construction change orders that will invariably happen on a project. I'm sure you've experienced it before for those who've been through construction. And in particular, for a renovation project, there are going to be unforeseen conditions that are going to get uncovered during the demolition phase of the project in particular, that are going to likely result in additional costs. So that's an additional contingency you should carry. And I think Brian is going to get to that, talk about that when he presents his overall recommendations for the project budget for hard costs and soft costs.
Frank, we happened to visit the North Haven Police Department, and during COVID, they had terrible disruptions with steel, and all of a sudden the price of steel went up by whatever it was, 100% or something. So there's an example of not just as you refer to as an escalation contingency, but as a spike in cost of materials that nobody could have foreseen. So I appreciate you adding your own quote unquote contingency.
Yeah, and that is a great example, although that's an example that I hope that none of us have to experience ever again. And who knows what's going to happen? I mean, back in 2009, 2010, construction costs for the one time in my career substantially reduced after the market crash. And
I hope you're not wishing that on us.
I'm not wishing it on me. Unfortunately, I'm relying upon the market to be strong from now on. Yes. So if we could, Brian, go back to the previous slide. All right, so I just wanted to quickly run down these assumptions that I've made, and stop me if you have any questions or if you have any concerns. So the pricing is based upon prevailing wage labor rates. I recognize the location of the project in the western part of Connecticut, which is, I think, influenced a little bit by the New York market as well. The estimate is based upon pricing or market conditions from current market conditions, but I've assumed a 4% escalation factor and assumed that the construction will start in the spring of 2022. If you think that the project's going to be delayed and start later, I mean, to be safe, you should use somewhere between a 4.5% and 5% escalation factor per annum for construction. That's just traditional, what has normally happens in the marketplace. But for now, the price is escalated to a spring of 2022 construction start. I've assumed no premiums for health and safety measures, which have resulted or had resulted from a COVID-19 pandemic. I think that there if the pandemic stays under control in its current level, I think that this is a safe assumption. If the pandemic worsens over time, I mean, there could be some costs associated with number one, provisions that need to be taken, unusual provisions, I guess, that need to be taken on site for the health and safety of workers. And then also, as I think Stuart had mentioned, some spikes that may happen with materials if the pandemic worsens over time. So that may be something that you want to have a contingency for. It's a wild card. As Brian had presented earlier, I've assumed 3 phases of construction over a 16-month period. I've also allowed a 1-month punch list for staff or for a superintendent to stay on the site for 1 month of punch list. So basically 17 months of a construction presence on site. I've included about in the estimate about $230,000 for temporary provisions that would need to be made in order to allow the building to remain partially occupied during the construction process. And I think a big portion of that is related to dispatch, to make sure that dispatch can keep operating uninterrupted 24/7 throughout the construction period. So there is a premium there built into the estimate for that. In terms of the demolition of the interior demolition or any exterior demolition of the project, I have not assumed or not included any abatement of hazardous materials, such as asbestos, PCBs, or lead paint.
Could we stop there for just 1 second? And can you tell
Absolutely.
us, maybe more, Brian, what we would need to, if we decided to go forward with a project, what kind of assessment we'd have to do on that line before moving forward?
Yes, in 2008, when we renovated the upper floor, there was a materials testing report completed. And there was very low incidence of hazardous materials at that time. And we have abated some of those materials in the renovations that have already taken place. So just to verify that, and also potential for mold, there would be additional testing that would be done now to make sure that it's been identified and we can get an estimate into the soft costs. So there are
And
companies that would. come
We
back.
bring in an environmental firm to do that?
That's correct.
Okay.
And so, Brian, you're anticipating that those unexpected, potential costs would be embedded in soft costs.
That is correct.
Next, removal and disposal of contaminated soil is not included. There's not a lot of soil excavation on this project, obviously, but if I have not, and I would anticipate that there is not contaminated soil on the site, but I did not include that, nor did I include any costs for any ledge or major below grade obstructions for the excavation of the addition or the pistol range.
But is that, Frank and Brian, is that what we're talking about doing, is pulling the soil away from the lower level to remediate the water issue?
That is correct, but that
Okay.
we're anticipating that soil would not be contaminated, environmentally contaminated, or we're not going to hit rock, ledge.
Right, but this would be an additional beyond. So to pull the soil back, that's a cost. We're assuming it's okay, that there's not contamination issues, but you know, there will be an expense to re-exposing the lower level of the building. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's in the estimate.
That is in, okay.
It is, yes, yeah, exposing the foundation on the front of the building,
Okay,
waterproofing putting a new waterproofing system on the foundation walls there, and then backfilling.
okay, but no surprises are assumed in that, and this is talking about
Exactly,
surprises. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
if there is any soil that has to be removed from the site, it's assumed it's just gonna go to a landfill. It's not gonna have to go to a special landfill for special processing or even going out of state or outside of the country to
Got
a
it.
special.
I have a
processing
question.
facility.
I have a question either for Brian or Joe or whoever is an expert in this. Is there any value in doing test digs, if you will, around the foundation of the building to make sure that it's there's no unknown issues before actually we move forward with the project? Is there any value to that? And that's my concern, is that there's something hidden that we're not aware of, and it'll create a substantial expense.
Yeah, we would recommend geotechnical engineering as a soft cost. If anywhere we're putting in a new foundation, so it would be the firing range and the physical training addition. That would give us soil conditions for structural purposes. It would also tell us if there's anything in the ground that's of concern.
Right. How about around the existing foundation, around the other exterior parts of the building, in the front and the sides?
No, that's assumed to be all backfill material from when they put it there. So.
I agree with Brian on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brian, as you know, there was a firing range in the cellar, and of course that's full of therefore lead. And I know that there was an abatement taking place on the firing range. Would there be any expectation that some of that lead has leaked into the ground outside the foundation, or is that extremely unlikely?
That's extremely unlikely.
Okay.
But as was recommended, if this becomes a project, certainly before we can look the community and give them a reasonable estimate, we will be bringing in another consultant to evaluate environmental risks. I mean, any estimate that we present to the town funding bodies, I think they would expect it, and we would expect it. So I think these would all be, under that umbrella of an additional environmental consultant study. Is that fair, Brian and Joe?
That is correct. The timing issue.
Okay, well, continuing on, so the estimate has assumed that the new addition and the pistol range and the carport would be supported on simple spread footing foundations. So in other words, no pile driving, caissons, or any other deep foundations were assumed for the support of these structures. I think that based upon the way we think the existing building is supported, that and the addition that was put on a few years ago for that garage, I think that's a reasonable assumption. As far as the cupola is concerned on the roof, we've assumed that in the estimate that the existing cupola will be removed and a new cupola will be manufactured and put in place on top of the existing base structure there, which would be refurbished. The estimate assumes that all the domestic hot water system and the boiler plant would remain and be reused for the new construction. But the HVAC system and every other area, save for the dispatch, would be completely removed and replaced with new.
How old is the current hot water system? Do we know how old that is?
The
If
the
we
boiler plant
keeping it-
is several years old, just about 7 years old. There's two boilers, and one's a newer boiler and one's a slightly older boiler.
Mhm.
But it has a usable life left in it. And I don't think we'd want to dispose of that asset early.
Yeah,
Okay.
normally I think you assume and Joe, you could correct me, I would assume a 20 to 25 year life cycle for a boiler plant.
Again,
Yeah.
how old is the current or the larger boiler that we're using today? How old is that?
6 or 7 years old.
And
With
then
a
the new-
brand new burner
Yeah,
during the gas conversion.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I think we just want to be sensitive and we want to be smart in maximizing useful life of stuff. But if it, we also want to be smart and not having to have somebody come in 10 years or 5 years from now and it being way more expensive to upgrade a system we could have dealt with initially. But those are fine tuning.
Yeah, and we can look at that further. It may make sense to replace the one older boiler with a condensing boiler. It's more efficient. So that's something that we can, that you guys can decide as a committee.
And we've assumed right now there's no sprinkler system in the attic that I could see from any of the photographs that was forwarded to me from Brian. So we've, in addition to just redoing all the sprinkler systems throughout the building that do exist, we've assumed putting in a new dry sprinkler system in the attic of the existing building. But I see a spelling error on my 13. I had just mentioned the existing boiler plant. I apologize for that. And lastly, the main electric service and the emergency generator equipment that exists, we've assumed will remain, but everything from the main electric room throughout the rest of the building will be replaced. And a complete new fire alarm system would be assumed for the entire building as well.
Frank, I
No,
think
not
there
quite
was an
sure what-
exception because I believe they put in new wiring for the new dispatch center that they ran separate new service to that.
Yeah, and I have assumed that the dispatch center is standalone, Jim, and would remain, functional and everything that's there would remain in place and have to be maintained throughout construction. So yes, you're right. The dispatch center would be an exception to that.
Would it be all new electrical besides that and all new lighting throughout the building?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of
I know
other,
you're- Go ahead.
yes, I mean, there's a couple of other things that I was told would remain. For instance, the elevator. I've assumed no new work on the elevator. That would mean that the electrical provisions for the elevator system, would remain in place. That would not be replaced. the,
When was the
They were-
elevator?
pardon me?
When was that? How old is the elevator?
I don't know.
That was a 2008 renovation.
And what's the useful life of an elevator typically?
Long time,
Life of the building.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I
We
wouldn't say the
have
life
any-
of a building, but I'd say it's, Brian, I would use something like 30 years or so for 30 to 40 years. I see buildings with elevator refurbishments happening after a 30 or 40-year life cycle.
When we put the elevator cab in, it does have all the accessibility requirements that come with the elevators today. So the control panel does have newer technology and accessibility requirements. In 2008, the shaft was there. We added the equipment to an existing shaft.
So we don't, and this is again fine tuning, we don't have any consideration of solar or anything like this. And the roof's okay, right? The roof's fine. And have we looked into that? Because I know we're doing a lot of solar across many of the town buildings.
Well, actually, Brian left space for solar on top of the carport. And the answer is, I believe the roof has been replaced sometime in the last 10 years. Joe, you may know the answer.
I believe it's 7 years old.
And what type of material is it? Is it asphalt or is it a slate or?
I believe it's a high quality, long duration roof, but not slate.
Okay.
And I'm assuming, Frank, that no costs of solar panels on the carport have been included here.
No, they have not.
Yeah, we've made it solar ready, but not included the panels.
What about the firing range? Could you put solar on top of that?
Well, on top of the firing range would be the mechanical equipment. So the roof would be taken up by mechanicals on that structure.
Oh, it'd be mechanicals for that structure. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a very large piece of equipment for the servicing of the pistol range that goes on the roof. That probably takes up a good third of the roof area.
And Frank, you might want to go over the pistol range cost estimate just as people are looking at it.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, if for those who might be familiar with construction costs a little bit and look at things on a cost per square foot basis, you might look at that $2.3 million number and be a little bit surprised at its cost per square foot, because it works out to almost $850 a square foot. But almost 40% of that cost is represented by the pistol range equipment and the HVAC that serves it. So the building itself, without the pistol range equipment, and without the HVAC that ventilates that pistol range, works out to about $525 a square foot. Now, that may seem to be a little bit expensive to some people for something that's basically a one-story bunker. But the building itself, by its very nature as being long and skinny, is very inefficient in terms of the perimeter of the building. You know, the perimeter of the building in relationship to the square footage of the building is unusually high, excuse me, unusually high compared to other buildings. And so the exterior of the building is roughly about 25 to 30%, has about 25 to 30% more material than a normal building that's, let's say more boxy would have. And that drives the costs up as well. The other part of it is that the building is a concrete bunker, has or a concrete and masonry bunker. It's assumed to be masonry CMU walls with a brick veneer on its surface as well. And then on the, I'm not sure, I think that's the west side. It's assumed it acts as a retaining wall because it's built in the slope of the site, and so there's a fairly costly concrete retaining wall on that side, which as the building is built into the hill. So all that said, it's an expensive little building, but when you pull out the pistol range costs, which if you were to look down at my estimate, are primarily in line item 23 and 28 under pistol range. And when you pull it out, it's about a $500 a square foot building, still an expensive building, but to me, it makes sense. To Brian, it makes sense in terms of its cost. And
So how soundproof is that building that you've estimated? Because we do have a lot of, residential areas around it. We would want it to be quiet.
you've got 8 inches of masonry block, and then you've got another 4 inches of brick on the outside of that on 3 sides, and you got I think I've assumed a 14-inch, maybe a 12-inch, but I think a 14-inch concrete wall on the retaining wall side. There's soundproofing, there's some sound deadening, I should say, inside the pistol range itself. But Brian, I think that you might hear some muffled noises from the pistol range, but I don't think that it would be something that would be obtrusive to the neighborhood, but maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, what you're gonna find is they're gonna hear the mechanical noise more than the firearms noise. There is gonna be the mechanical noise of the rooftop unit going. Our experience is that doesn't exceed any noise ordinance, but it does add another mechanical noise, condenser noise to the environment when the range is in use. But it's more that we have to deaden the mechanical noise. We've already taken measures to deaden the firearms noise.
So Brian, the one thing that maybe I could mention is that we have assumed that there will be a mechanical screen around the mechanical equipment on that pistol range. However, I did not assume it to be an acoustical screen. You could use acoustical panels, which would add a little bit more cost to the overall bottom line to help to mitigate some of the airborne noise from that mechanical equipment.
I would
I
urge
think
us.
we ought to assume that.
Yeah, that's what we had to do at Saks.
I agree with Jim and Penny. Let's just consider that part of the project right from the start. It is a residential neighborhood and on all sides, so.
We're gonna get huge questions from neighbors with this in terms of the noise of the firing range. And we don't wanna, we wanna have added everything I'm sure there's work we can do and studies we could take from other firing ranges, that would be similarly, fitted out. Maybe we'd even have to do a visit or something while one was in use and stand outside it.
We ought to do the best that's state of the art. both in sound
Yeah,
absorption and in reducing the noise from the equipment, because we are close to South Avenue Cottage. And our commitment has generally been to try and not disturb them.
And we had, yeah,
Exactly. And while we're talking about the South Avenue Cottage, not just related to the Pistol Range, but to the overall project, we don't put a line in for landscaping. And I believe that the final project and the estimates will include, my guess, maybe a landscape architect and some significant landscaping to help shield our neighbors. I mean, it's just the right thing to do for them. So I think that that's a cost that'll probably be added into the project as well.
I would say with the consideration of the pistol range, in addition to, all the structural questions, it seems to me that we ought to just do a cost benefit analysis, whether having a pistol range on site and the costs associated with that versus a projection moving forward with what it costs for us to have our officers training elsewhere in terms of their time, their travel, the access to facilities. It seems that we should just at least, look at it and understand what savings or expenses, at least from a financial standpoint, that it could present or not present.
I agree, Amy, because let's face it, if we don't do it, it certainly will be asked of us appropriately by the funding bodies if this project moves forward, and therefore it's something we should have done before it's asked for.
Yeah, and I realize it's not 100% a financial analysis on this, but at least we should have that perspective on it as we present it as an option or not an option.
You're right, Amy, and this is the best possible situation for installing a range, because it's half underground and it just happens to be a spot that's perfectly suited to this, probably better than any other site could have. So, but we need to do both the quantitative and the qualitative analysis.
And there may be options with this for us to be partnering with other PDs who are in need of this training facility that can help offset potentially some of the costs. But that's a separate analysis.
Well, is it a separate, I mean, why wouldn't we begin a dialogue with, for example, Wilton as of, so to speak, this week and ask whether they wouldn't want to pay for half the construction and half the maintenance costs, and then be able to have access to it, accordingly.
Well put. Maybe it's not a separate analysis. It's part of the analysis. Let's put it that way. Sorry.
So I just want to move on. If you didn't have any, I think the next couple slides we can go through quickly, and it may just be common knowledge, but Frank has put together the hard costs. That's the construction and site work. Now I'm trying to get to a total project budget, knowing that there are a lot of variables that are still out there, a lot of ways to deliver the project to the town as far as construction management, clerk of the works, other project costs, which we call soft costs. And then the contingency that was talked about, Frank has his, but the owner wants theirs also. Any project has 3 buckets and we need to fill all 3. Because we're not specific yet on every detail, I'm just giving you a range of costs. So soft costs, typically we would go 20%. It may be as high as 30% of the hard cost number would be additional project costs to take care of all the things above, including fees or environmental testing or even acoustical consultants would be a soft cost that we could add to the project. The contingency.
Can you step back, Brian? Are you
Yes.
including phasing costs in those soft costs or phasing costs additional? Because I didn't see phasing.
Phasing costs are within Frank's hard costs.
So he's including like where we're gonna fit out Irwin for putting people?
No,
I'm
no.
including non-phasing costs not within the building.
If there's moving expenses, if there's fit out, it would all be within a soft cost. So
Okay,
that
so
would
that's
be
not,
added.
do you have it, have you included, you didn't include that in this 20 to 30?
If I'm giving you examples above of what typical soft costs are, these are not all inclusive.
Okay,
20 to 30% of the hard costs as a range is typical to see in a project of this scope.
Okay,
So I'm just adding, I think when we get all of those items identified, you're gonna fall within a 20 to 30% range. And
I'm sorry,
also,
Brian, I don't mean to beat this one over the head, but let me just once again be clear. If you go back one screen, you're saying typical, I understand 20 to 30% of hard costs would represent soft costs. I'm very specifically to follow up on what Penny is asking. If there's a $1 million renovation, let's just say to Irwin, that would not be a part of your soft cost estimate. Is that correct? Or am I wrong?
that would be a soft cost estimate.
It would be a part of it. Okay.
Yes,
Okay. Thank
yes.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that clarification.
Yeah.
Storage just said $1 million for relocation costs. Right?
I said, if there was, moving expenses, building out Irwin, whatever, rental of trailers for evidence storage, security cameras, lighting, whatever those things are related to moving temporarily to Irwin, if it ended up being $1 million, would they be a part of soft costs? And Brian said, yes, they would be.
Okay, so they would be, but they're not necessarily the 30%. If we went to a full move off site, which, may be discussed at some point, I don't think the 30% would cover a full move off site. It's based on, a best guess of the range of the scope of work as it exists today.
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. That's a very important clarification. Thank you.
Just something to consider. 20% of this hard costs are in the range. So when you're adding another contingency on top of that, and most of these soft costs don't apply to the range. And things like you're discussing, moving, relocation, all that stuff. So this number is actually bigger than it seems.
oh yeah, good point.
Yeah, it's off the 11.2, which includes the range.
Exactly. And many of these soft costs don't deal with the range.
Correct. Correct. With any project going forward, we're at least recommending a 10% owner's project contingency for unknowns.
So
So
is-
I gave a range of 10 to 15. You could make this whatever you want for a contingency, but for renovations, we a lot of times say 15. So you could even say 15 to 20 might be a planning tool for contingency at this point.
So that's on top of the 10% contingency we have built into the, rough hard costs, which I get, it's got to be rough at this point. So basically that all in, what is it, 11 million? You're saying add 10% on 10 to 15 on that. And then on that, 20 to 30% for the soft costs. If we did
Right.
everything, if we
And
did
that-
everything. And that
and this-
doesn't include vacating 100% as Joe pointed out, right?
It's only to implement the schematic design that we've presented, the cost estimate that we presented, and the proposed solution that we presented. The proposed solution was only taking the Detective Bureau to Irwin and some storage to Irwin. If those conditions change, then this budget needs to change.
So this is sort of an order of magnitude, idea about if we renovate, we're looking, in the range of, well, just knowing how projects go, probably 16 million. But, and then
Inclusive of
maybe
the
we
range, right?
can-
Yes.
This
Including the
includes the range. So it's
And so
not just
can you-
renovate, it's renovate and add a range.
Yeah, this
So-
is appealing.
With a needs, and since you have a space needs assessment, and Frank, you've done a lot of cost estimating, and Brian, you have too. Can you tell us with the needs that we have and meeting those in a new building? So and ignoring any of the extraordinary costs that you might have, with a new building, like what it would cost, what a new building costs, in comparison.
Yeah, I might throw that question to Frank.
And Penny, you're assuming there's no land cost involved. You're just talking about the
I'm
building.
assuming no land costs. I guess what I'd like to know is, let's say that instead of the good brick report we had a lousy brick report. So we actually thought that we were gonna have to tear this building down and we were gonna put one up in this spot. So what would be the demolition cost and what would be just ballpark? And then what to build a building like that New Canaan would accept, which would be basically recreating this building, probably cupola and everything, because it all goes along with it. So that quality, how much per square foot would that be? And, what are we comparing this to?
And may I add a footnote that we wouldn't be at 30,000 square feet, we'd be at 28 or 27, back down to where we were.
Well, you'd have to add the range back if
Yeah.
you want to add the range, though.
Right, but
Right.
your 30,000 doesn't include the range.
That's correct. You'd be at the space needs assessment plus 2,700 square feet for a range.
Right.
Yeah,
So what
so a new building plus range. What's
Yeah,
that?
so we want the new building right where the old building currently is and a range.
Yes.
Oh, you already know what the range number is. I mean, you got a range
Well,
number.
But the range number, if it is incorporated within the building as opposed to a separate building, is a
Oh,
different
separate
cost.
building.
Ah,
building.
good point. Very good point, Frank.
Sure, yeah.
Right? I mean, if you were to build a new building, I would assume you'd figure out a way to put the range probably in the basement of that building.
I
Yeah,
don't
Yep.
think so. No.
So that the foundation area would be
Yep.
serving a dual purpose of not just creating space for a pistol range, but also supporting the building above. So it would be more cost efficient.
But in that case, it would
Pistol
still go up to 30,000 square feet again.
Yeah, so we're at 30,000 square feet. I mean, I think that for budget purposes, you should use somewhere around $550 a square foot, all in for construction costs for the range, for the building, inclusive of the range. You should use another $25 a square foot to tear down the existing building. And you probably would be redoing all the site work and all the utilities that serve, you'd be bringing new utilities into the building. So that could be another $1 million for your entire site plus utility costs. So let's see. So 30,000.
You're at 18.2.
But that's not including soft costs, right?
That's not soft cost. Now add Brian. Now I'll say this, and Brian, you could correct me if I'm wrong. The risk factor, the risk amounts on soft costs, or at least on contingency, is far less for new construction than renovation. So I would think you'd use the 10% would be certainly more than ample for the owner's contingency on that. As far as the soft cost is concerned, your wild card is your relocation costs. Unless, if there was a way you could build a new building and keep the existing building in place and operational while you're building the new building.
That's not gonna
That'd
work.
be great.
No,
but
that's not,
if-
we're not going there, Frank.
If you can't do that,
We can't do
then
that.
you
Frank.
have to find a way to relocate the entire police facility, right? Which I think could be a very large expense, especially for dispatch operations and detention.
So this would be up around 24. All those things.
May I make a suggestion before we start throwing numbers around? Why don't we take that discussion offline and have that, which to me is option B, and option B prepared separately so we can compare it, as opposed to I'm working on the back of an envelope here, which is just not the way to do it.
Good idea.
All right. So I don't want to say 24. I don't want to say 22. I don't want to say 20. I don't want to say 18. We don't know. So if we were tasked with three things to look at, option A, B, and C. Now we've taken C off the table, but again, we haven't looked at B. And for me, I'd like to know what B really is. before any decision can be made on A or B, right?
Paul, is your C a different location?
No, the C was build behind and sell the building in
Okay,
front.
right. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. For me,
Okay,
there
so
is
we take it-
no,
C
there's
is
only
off the
A, B.
table.
Yeah, there is no D, if you will. I
Right.
only have A,
Okay.
B, or C in my
Right.
mind for this project. That's,
I agree
if we
we
could
should
do
do
that.
it offline, but I think we should do it quickly, like within the next week to 10 days. Shouldn't take another.
It's really nothing more than a top-down, very generic estimate of what a new building on the current site could potentially cost. It's nothing more than that. It's not a detailed cost analysis, but it is something to at least point to as a committee to decide going forward where we wanted to focus our efforts.
right.
Frank, is
Because we
that
are,
something that you could work up? Is that it within your current scope of work, or we need to pay you more money for that?
Well, it all depends. If you're gonna give me these parameters that we've currently talked about, and I just run off of that, then it's, it's more or less formalizing this back of the envelope analysis. If you're going to send me some drawings,
No, just
no drawings, right? No.
yeah,
Just
then
be-
I'm happy to work with Brian on putting
I
something
think
together.
And I think what we want to have an idea is the new building and the range, what would be broken out as, the relocation costs broken out, because we might have ways to deal with some of that issue that Leon was telling us about. And, demolition. So those three sort of separate line items.
Yep, I'm
And the
happy,
site-
I'm happy to do that.
And site and utility work, those.
Yeah.
things I thought about.
Mhm.
I apologize. I have to jump off. This is going a little longer than I thought it was. So I have a meeting I have to go to. So I'll circle back with the. Bill.
Amy?
Yeah.
Before you go, I guess one of the things I was hoping to get out of today is a general feeling from the committee about the direction that we should be going. In other words, if we like this direction, should we proceed with the next steps, which would be sort of, geotechnical engineering to make sure it works, a test on the brick and the porosity, the environment, bringing in an environmental consultant, and possibly, we'd have to think about hiring our project team relatively quickly if we're talking about a spring 2022 start. We got to be. I think that's a little aggressive.
I
Yes,
agree,
so-
Penny. Well, at a minimum, I think we should take a motion, and I'm just, thinking out loud here, to move forward on approving some kind of an environmental study, and I could be, whatever the experts think we would need to move the feasibility of this project forward before we're asked for that kind of a thing. So I would ask the committee to come up with a motion, or the building committee to come up with a motion to move forward with some kind of a proposal or a request for funds to do some kind of an environmental study of the existing building.
Bill, before we
Joe, how
even
much
get
money
back,
do we have left?
hey, Bill, before we get back there, can I ask a bigger conceptual question about the building committee and our role? Because
Yes.
I know somehow it was carved out that looking at alternative locations got carved out of our purview, right? And so my question is, have we formalized how that works? So is from, the town hall, are we going to be, what happens with that? Does that come to us? And there's, we have an understanding of what potentials are here. And does those recommendations or not recommendations come to us? And then as a building committee, do we do a analysis of, whether we think this is better or an alternative site's better, and take all these things into consideration, and then put forward a recommendation?
Right,
on
I
how to
think that-
proceed? Where does that stand? I just don't know how, I don't know what, because it seems to me, it's like we're supposed to, I had the understanding as a building committee, we were supposed to kind of evaluate, what should we do with our police department? Look here, or somewhere else? And does that come back to us, or is, because we can't have two approaches on this. We have to have it somewhere where there is a global evaluation of it. And I just don't know where that stands in terms of that understanding between different bodies.
That's a very good point, Amy. I'm still not completely clear. I wish I was on the next steps. When I'm assuming when the working group of the town employees come up with a potential for another site for a police station, the actual logistics of how that will be presented and decided is still a little cloudy with me. There's certainly no doubt that the traditional town bodies will be, that any project will be going through the traditional town bodies for bonding approvals and things like that. But the initial vetting is still a little unclear with me. So I think that.
How do we clear that up? I mean, honestly, because I thought the building committee was to figure out, you try to get minds together and figure out how we should go forward and fixing the problem that we have a dilapidated police department, right? And so whether it's here or somewhere else, I thought it was kind of initially that the committee was going to look at that holistically. So how do we figure out from the town's, what options are they going to bring it to us? We just can't have two paths. We can't say, we think this option on site is the best. It has to be in context of, are there other options or not? Right. So what's our role?
Yep. Well, I think the first thing we need to do is button up as best we can what this project would cost and truly look like. And I think the next thing for us to do is first off realize that the number 14.6 to 63 is completely preliminary general draft number. It's not a final budget cost by any stretch, final estimate. But we certainly need an environmental analysis to be done before we can feel good about any kind of estimate. So that's one. But more importantly, to your question about when alternatives to a refurbishment are potentially brought forward, how are they being brought forward, and who's going to do the initial investigation, if you will, of those potential alternatives to a refurbishment, if in fact they do seem viable. Right now, nothing has been brought forward. I don't think anything is, Joe would know a little better than me, but I don't think anything is close to being brought forward right now. Maybe certainly within a month, maybe something will be brought forward, but I'm speaking out of turn. I haven't spoken.
Does it get brought forward to us? That's the question. Where does it get brought forward? Because, if we can say this sounds like a great idea where we are, but if someone's got a brilliant idea that's going to work somewhere else, that is analysis we have to take in place. And we do know how difficult it is to change anything in town. So that's a soft cost.
I think Bill and Kevin need to work that out quickly.
Mhm.
Yes. Can we have
Agreed.
that before our next meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
So to help to support Bill's point, there's a few more things we can do to help this part of the analysis along. So I would put a motion forward that we proceed with environmental mortar tests and any other appropriate studies that can be contained within the budget that has already been allocated to Joe.
Do we know what that would cost?
What budget?
The $500,000 that we set aside.
Oh, that one.
cost
Thank you.
from-
Thanks.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm
Do we know
confusing
how much
budgets.
environmental studies cost? Guesstimate? I mean, we have to do them.
Yeah, somewhere in the order of magnitude of $25,000,
We gotta do it. Mhm.
depending on how many tests we do and what was already
And-
previously done.
Should we do the geotechnical engineering to get an idea about the, whether or not this is feasible in terms of the additions?
Let's include
Or
that.
is
And let's
that- is
include
that-
let's include that, and let's include the mortar test.
Yeah.
The ceiling test.
Is that also, we also including digging down to make sure the brick down low is okay? if we exposed it?
Yeah,
I
should
did-
we do that too, Brian?
I
That
think
was-
I think that's an assumption we can be pretty reliable on, that that's gonna not result in any contamination.
Yeah.
Not
I
in
don't- I think
contamination,
that-
but if we have to dig it out, it was just the condition of the brick. Where
Are we worried about that?
No, it's gonna be the same brick, we're just gonna waterproof it.
Okay. I do
let's
have to
go on.
jump. Do we have to vote on something? I'm sorry, I have a meeting. I'm
Joe,
late.
Jim, what's your motion?
I move that we move forward with the environmental brick, the geotech and any other studies that need to be done to firm up these estimates.
Do we have a cost max on that up to
Let's
X
say,
amount?
let's say a cost max of 100,000.
I'll
Or not to
second.
exceed. All right, I have a question on that motion. Does that include studying option B a little bit further on a more formal basis?
I think they're going to include option B in what we've already contracted for, if I understood Frank correctly.
Yes. But
Thanks.
to your
All right.
point, Paul, yeah, I think that's not part of this motion, but I think I think Frank and Brian agreed to give us some kind of an estimate for option B.
Good, because I just feel as though we're being jammed on, I feel personally jammed on option A only, which I'm against. Okay,
So we should get a real cost on option B. I'm in favor of that.
Yeah. In fact, we should probably make that a separate motion. Let's do the environmental first, and then we'll formalize the option B cost as a separate motion, just to formalize that. I think that's appropriate.
Okay, so I'll second Jim's motion.
Yep.
Approved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Aye.
Unanimous?
Was
Thank
that, I couldn't see people, is that unanimous?
I think
yes.
so.
I think so.
Okay, and then Paul, the second motion will be yours. What is that?
To further explore option B, that we have a
Mhm.
more formal presentation on the other alternative as to build as new,
Yeah,
To-
Bill new on site, right, Paul?
build new on site, right?
To
Yep.
include costs, but not drawings. Is that fair?
Correct, we don't need drawings. We
Yeah.
don't need it, because
I'll
we'll,
second
the
Second
drawings will,
that motion.
But there are
And-
two other quick things that need to be added to that, Paul. I think one is
Okay.
we've got to agree to the square footage of the building versus the square footage of the range. So if those two combined would be 30,000, that would be an underlying assumption. And that there would be some detail as to the costs relative to moving off-site completely.
Right.
right,
Thank
well,
you.
those would be
Yes.
estimated in there as well, because you got to
Yeah, that's
compare
a very
apples
good-
to apples.
A
here.
very good clarification, Stuart. Thank you.
Brian, do you think that 30, is that the right square footage from the needs assessment that you have? I would just refer to you on the square footage.
I agree with Stuart on that. I think the wild card for Frank and I would be the complete relocation of the police department. There's a lot of variables with that it will have to
Yeah.
be arranged. We
That's
don't
fine.
know lease costs or availability. I know Irwin Park is not going to accommodate everybody, so it's going to be really a guess with some ranges of numbers for.
And that's
whether-
fine, that's
Yeah.
fine. You know,
And you know,
we-
those guys down at Darien are going to try to triple whatever they're asking when they see we're hurting. You know those guys.
Okay.
So Paul, your motion is to have a more formalized cost estimate for option B going forward to include a complete relocation of the police department on a temporary basis and a roughly $30,000 total square
3,000
foot.
square foot. Right,
Okay.
and you could actually further define it as a standalone range or the range in the basement.
Right.
If that can be broken out that way as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Paul.
Okay,
So a second to Paul's motion.
I'll second.
Second,
Thank you, Penny. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
unanimous also? All
yes,
right. Thank you for hanging in there, Amy.
Okay, and also I just really want, I want to, not to beat something down. I really want to know how we coordinate with the other group by the next meeting and
Yes.
what our role is in this. And my hope is that the role is that it comes and gets presented to us and then we as a committee take a holistic approach of A, B, C, and actually this would be
And
D.
I guess
okay?
D, correct. Good-
And my
good point.
assumption that is we do it in one place and we don't have two bodies moving forward so that we can present something holistically. And I got to run. Thanks,
Oh, yeah.
everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, as far as next steps are concerned, I think we've just sort of handled those, correct? Any other next steps that the committee wants to think about, or Brian, that you recommend to us, or Joe, that you recommend to us?
I have one last question. Maybe Brian can answer. I'm going to contact Darienne's chief and see what's possible for dispatch and jail, because that's the most logical option. Would a 1 year timeframe be adequate for a new building, and or if we needed to vacate due to the renovation, if that's the option?
Let me have a discussion with Frank before I give you that answer.
Okay,
Because you're gonna have to be out of there before anything starts, and then you can't go back until everything is completed. So I think
Right.
it may be more than a year.
okay,
Definitely it'll be more than a year.
okay.
Okay.
But we'll give you a better answer on that, Chief, but thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Bill, just a couple quick slides. I don't want to belabor
Yep.
this, but it came up at the last meeting that we had in June. And I just wanted to respond that there was a discussion about how many female lockers should be in the locker room. And we talked about how we based it off of 20% department staffing levels. There was some concern that 20% wasn't enough. So we did look at that and try to increase that to a 30% staffing level. And the option 1 and 2 is just reconfiguring the space that we had, but we had to lose 1 toilet fixture. So instead of, the prior, we had 3 toilet fixtures and 2 showers, 2 sinks. Now we're at, so by losing a toilet fixture, we can go up to 13 lockers within those spaces by doing it in another couple ways. If you wanted to go and maintain the toilet count, we would expand into other areas and expand it into 14 lockers, but that gets you to a 30%. I just wanted to let you know that the plan isn't locked in stone. I mean, there is things during design that we can continue to address.
Or in porcelain, as the case may be.
In porcelain, yeah. So I just give this back to the committee as just information. But you said next steps. As far as our scope, the next steps was, I think we've completed what we've been asked to do. We were going to put everything into a final report, but now we'll just add the option B results that you're looking for also. So that's it for me here. So
Thank you. Any final questions for Frank or Brian?
Oh, very good. Thanks.
Thank you so much, guys. Any other elements we want to talk about? The only thing I thought that jumped out at me, and I'll just reiterate the on the cost, the landscaping. I gotta believe that if we do move forward with a refurbishment, that our neighbors would request that it would be the right thing to do to have some more serious landscaping as a potential shield and things like that. That would be incremental costs as well. That was not included initially with the initial estimates, but that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Are there any other comments we want to make?
Let me just ask you guys, I'm happy to update the estimate to reflect, a more ample budget for landscaping, as well as to factor in the premium cost for acoustical panels to abate or to mitigate the pistol range equipment, and reissue that to Brian so that he can put that in his final report with those costs in it.
I'd certainly be in favor of that, Frank.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
That'd be
Yep.
really helpful.
No
Yeah.
problem.
And no
Okay.
matter what,
Just want
no
to say
matter
thank
what
you to
route we
Frank and to
take.
Brian for all their good work.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you both.
Yeah, and I
Well,
hope the
you're
neighbors
welcome.
understand that no matter what route we take, A, B, C, D, E, we'll make sure that it looks good at the end of the day. for the
Mhm.
neighbors and everything. That's a fixed cost that we've got a pledge to do that. So no matter which route we take. So
Okay,
motion to adjourn?
Anything else before we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn right here.
Here we go.
Second.
Second. Oh, thanks a lot, guys. Brian and Frank, thank you very much.
yes,
Thanks,
thank you.
guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Pleasure. Thanks. Bye.